It is the nature of humankind to push itself toward the horizon. We test our limits. We face our fears. We rise to the challenge and become something greater than ourselves. A civilization.
Hola, comrades. Today's topic of interest, civilization. Yes, the whole thing. No, this is a lesser-known franchise compared to the likes of Mario and Zelda, but I'm making this video because there was a time in my life when I was transfixed with the Civilization franchise. I was always more of a console gamer, but Civilization was the exception to the rule. I first heard about it, like many games back then, from Nintendo Power. Long live Nintendo Power, am I right? Without it, the only games I would have been interested in from the age of 5 or 6 to when I was finally blessed with high-speed internet would have been Pokémon games. I saw a preview for a game called Civilization Revolution, a history nut ever since I was a little kid. I was interested and then exhilarated when I used my slow dial-up internet to find out there was an entire franchise connected to it. For Christmas, I received an entire Civilization box set, which was awesome. I mean, this was a quality box set. I was giddy. The original Civilization I never played much. It had been almost 20 years since the game's release in 1991, and its age showed. Civ 2 I played a little, but mostly when I needed a break from Civ 3, which I reckon I poured upwards of 1,000 hours into. And 1,000 hours well spent, if you ask me. If I booted up the game right now, every bit of strategy and tactics I learned would come rushing back to me like a roaring river. That's how deeply ingrained the game is in my brain. I also watched the features on the DVD that came with the box set, which were about the origins of the franchise and its creator, Sid Meier, as well as about the development of Civilization 4, which was also included with the set. So why didn't I play Civ 4, you may ask? It had very little to do with the game itself and a lot to do with my computer, which did not have the power to run Civilization 4. When we finally got a new computer, which was a good 2 to 3 years after I got the box set, and well after Civilization 5 was released, I was finally given the chance to play Civ 4, which was by then more a relief than anything else. I was older and busier, and I didn't have as much time to pour into video games, but I still spent a couple hundred enjoyable hours on Civ 4, which is widely considered to be the franchise's high point. It was certainly a major step up from Civ 3, and whether it was worth waiting 2 to 3 extra years for, I'm certainly glad I played it. There's something quite ironic in this. Namely, that something as apparently simple as getting a game to play on my computer was expanded into this great odyssey when the Civilization franchise is all about the opposite. In this series, the entire history of the world from the beginning of human civilization up past present day into the future is condensed into a single turn-based video game. This is a daunting task, to say the least, even when everything is radically simplified. So how does Civilization pull it off? First, it's important to define exactly what kinds of games these are. They're strategy games, yes, but they also fit into a specific subgenre of strategy games called 4X. This is a familiar term within the community, but it would probably be helpful to define it for outsiders. This term was coined in 1993 by a man named Alan Emmerich when talking about Master of Orion. The 4 X's he talked about were explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. True, none of those words actually start with the letter X, but that's beside the point. In these games, you control an empire and have to expand it. They are renowned for their intricate gameplay and their level of micromanagement. There is a lot to think about when deciding exactly how to build your empire. Many of these games take place in outer space, such as the aforementioned Master of Orion or Alpha Centauri. But Civilization is different because its scope is very human. You start with nothing and have to found cities and mine your resources and build cultural wonders. This takes some of the self-aggrandizing arrogance, the megalomaniacal edge off the subgenre. Let me read through those 4 X's again. Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. The first of those sounds moral enough. Exploration has been considered a noble goal for centuries. We still celebrate the age of exploration. However, those other 3 X's sound like the goals of a generic Dark Lord from an epic fantasy series. 4X games are not completely about stomping other leaders and countries and what have you into the dust, but that's certainly a big part of it. When you're playing these games, it's hard to imagine you're the good guys, which is okay. You don't necessarily have to be the good guys in a game to immerse yourself in it, but you should feel like your actions are justified or at least understandable. Even a genuine psychopath like Tony in The Sopranos can be empathized with. But in a 4X game, there is sometimes no reason you're embarking on your quest except that taking over the world or the galaxy is something that a lot of nerds dream about. However, in Civilization, there is substance. Not only are there a wide variety of victory options, there's a sense that you're taking the open wilderness and establishing an order to it. When you send your settlers out near the start of the game, there's a chance that they'll get eaten by lions, but by the end of the game, you have tanks and bombers and rocket ships and these lush, thriving metropolises. Your journey is one of accomplishment. Still, I have my problems with the franchise. As a history buff, I hate to see these complicated cultures and technologies reduced down to the equivalent of game pieces and community chests, respectfully, on Monopoly boards, but I can bury those annoyances. To do any single one of these cultures justice, an ambitious game arcing through multiple genres with several main characters. This series is not attempting to seriously examine and analyze history, but rather use it as the backdrop for an intriguing 4X game. And it is up to me as the gamer and the critic to accept that and to judge it on those grounds. However, I do not believe it would be inappropriate to say that the diplomacy system lacks any sort of realism, with opposing leaders being far too war-hungry even considering their reputations in history. Also, the warfare system itself relies far too heavily on brute force and not enough on tactics. The behavior of your citizens is often arbitrary, and there are not strict enough punishments for switching between forms of government willy-nilly. From a gameplay perspective, the series' biggest flaw is a lack of permanent transformation in the gameplay between eras. Controlling a civilization, just starting out into the world, is not the same as leading a massive global superpower, and it shouldn't play the same. Implementing this would be difficult, but I would prefer more time to be spent toward that, and less to be spent toward stacking the tech tree with every possible fitting technology. If done properly, it would give more weight to the player's progression throughout the game. However, speaking of the technology tree, it is a good example of how Civilization effectively condenses the history of the world. You pick techs from the tree, study them, learn them, and the techs you learn allow you to research more techs. That's a smart way to make manageable the thousands of years of history that must be covered without risking oversimplification. And while I could point out 100 areas where the series falters, I could also point out 100 areas where it has improved dramatically since the first game. While not every installment is better than those that came before it in all areas, and Civ 5 especially failed to capture the magic of Civ 4, the creators of each game have charged ahead with their new visions for the franchise, fixing a lot of the old problems. For example, the combat system still has major flaws, but it has been drastically improved from the days of Civ 2, where fortified spearmen on hilly terrain could often defeat attacking tanks. This happened far too often for as absurd a situation as it was, so the system was changed throughout the next few Civilization games. It's not impossible for a spearman to defeat a tank now, and playing through the game it occurs more than it realistically should, but it's not the absurd nuisance that it was in the early days. And take another classic Civ problem. You build the best units available to you, but if they don't die in battle in the early game, you quickly end up with a patchwork military by late game that has catapults fighting alongside bomber planes, tanks fighting alongside swordsmen. Then along came Civ 4, which allowed you to upgrade your old units, removing this embarrassment in one fell swoop. Certain smart ideas have been there from the beginning, like how the time system works. Because less was accomplished in any given year in ancient times than in modernity, the turns start out standing for longer intervals of time, then shorten as you progress through the game. By modern times, every turn is only the equivalent of 1 year. There's also an interesting dynamic with the ships. Just as civilizations of the olden ages only knew as much of the world as they had explored, you, the player, can only see as much of the map as your ships have uncovered. And in an added complexity, your early game ships can't go out into deep waters, so you can't explore the entire world in a tiny dinky little boat. While far from perfect, Civilization is one of the most ambitious franchises in gaming. Its scope is grand. Starting from the first game in the franchise, your objective has been no less than to build an empire to stand the test of time. And with so many options for micromanagement, you get a feeling like you're actually building a world power, albeit a simplified version of one, through your hard work and cunning. Many franchises released alongside Civ have been forgotten, but with every new installment, drawing legions of hardcore fans back to their all-night bids of military, technological, and cultural domination, it is safe to say that the franchise itself has stood the test of time. If you haven't played Civilization, and you're one of the very few people these dark days who still has a lot of time on your hands, go and give it a shot. It's not for everyone, and there's a bit of a learning curve, but you just might develop a lifelong obsession. Ever since I was a little kid, if there was one subject in school that did not bore me, it was history. And in a time before I was able to take actual, detailed, interesting history classes, these games made its broad strokes come to life. I still remember so much about the games, including weird little cute details, like how in Civilization 3 the fashion of the leaders changes with the eras. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more amazing content. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that taffy sweet stuff. Adios, comrades!